That sweet sound you hear is the Christmas version of our trademark jingle, which can only mean one thing. It's the last episode of the year.
Yes, and in what is becoming a bit of a tradition, we are recording this festive episode in front of a live audience of our lovely Patreon supporters, tuning in from all over the world using the magic of Zoom.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see everyone. Oh, they're waving.
It's very nice to see you all here, and we will hopefully hear from some of you later on in the show, but for now, we're keeping you all on mute to avoid that video call chaos that we all so loved during the pandemic.
Yeah, fun times. Producers Katz and Wojciech are also here. Hello, you two.
Hello.
Hi.
Wojciech, I don't think it's actually snowing over there in Warsaw, but I guess you're feeling pretty festive today?
Yeah, just right before we connected on this call, the new prime minister received the vote of confidence. And yeah, that was I must confess, I was pretty moved. And I think it's a big thing to say because I'm not a great fan of this particular person, nor of any of the parties that are part of the coalition. But I think that this coalition, which is very varied internally, I think this is a promise of the democracy being back in Poland after long 8 years of not so democratic rule of the former party in power. So yeah, so a very festive ambience here.
Yay.
Yeah, I have to say, I find it quite moving that for once in Europe, there's some positive political news, because I was feeling, as you might have heard in a few episodes ago, I was feeling a bit bleak about politics in Europe. But it's really exciting to see what's happening in Poland and see that things can get better.
It is very exciting. I'm also a big fan of Donald Tusk's Instagram account, so I'm excited to see him
it's good.
see what he's going to do with that as Prime Minister.
Katz, you're not in the Netherlands at the moment, are you? Where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in Italian Switzerland, or Italian-speaking Switzerland, and it's very pretty.
You were telling us before we connected about that there's a very specific end-of-year tradition in that part of Switzerland, right?
Yeah, it's not actually in this section of Switzerland, but in Appenzeller Canton, there's this tradition called Silvesterklaus, and it's on the last day of the year, 31st of December. There's this parade, and it starts before dawn at 4 a.m, and they dress up in these crazy outfits that are made of twigs and stuff, so they look like walking Christmas trees, really big ones with big giant cowbells hanging on front. It's to cleanse the spirits of the year. And then they do this incredible yodeling, and it's really impressive. And it's pre-Christian. It's a really old tradition. So I thought that was very exciting to hear about. And there are really good pictures. You have to look at them. And it took me down a whole rabbit hole of pagan European traditions. There's a bunch in Austria. There's so many good photos to be looked at.
I have to say, I feel like dressing up as a giant Christmas tree and yodeling would feel quite spirit cleansing.
Yeah, and surprisingly terrifying and authoritative.
For some reason, I can really imagine you doing that, Katie. I don't know why.
Not quite sure what to make of that. Anyway, apart from this being a special episode because it's being recorded in front of our lovely guests, the other thing that is special about the last podcast of the year is that this is the only episode where I get to eat snacks without you telling me off, Dominic, for chewing disgustingly into my microphone. As you know, I live above a branch of Europe's favourite German discount supermarket, Lidl. So I've got some delicious little gingerbread here. What are you munching on?
I have some mince pies. I just got back from the UK, so I kind of stocked my car up with mince pies. They are the best Christmas snack, in my opinion. What about you, Katz?
I'm in a place with kaki trees, so I've got this kaki fruit with me.
Persimmons.
And I made myself an Aperol Spritz, which is the same color.
Very orange. Wojciech, what have you got?
I've got nothing now, but I took part in a little reception at the nursery of my younger son, and they treated me with some gingerbread cookies made by 2.5-year-olds and 2-year-olds.
Oh.
They were pretty hard, had more toppings than actual cookie, but were the sweetest ones on earth. So yeah, highly recommend.
So that I can eat more of my gingerbread, let me ask you a question, Dominic, so I can fill my mouth. What is coming up in this final show of the year?
We've got a great festive guest who's going to be joining us a bit later on. The Icelandic author Hildur Knútsdóttir will be zooming in to talk about the most delightful of literary Christmas traditions that comes from Iceland. But first, of course, it's time for Good Week, Bad Week. Wojciech, hit the jingle.
Good week, bad week.
Let's kick off this festive edition of Good Week, Bad Week. Who's had a bad week, Katie?
I'm giving bad week to diplomatic relations between the UK and Norway.
That doesn't sound very festive.
It is festive, I promise you. This is a festive edition of Bad Week. And that is because, at its heart, this is a story about a Christmas tree in London. You were in London recently, of course.
Yes, I was filling my car with mince pies.
Did you happen to swing past Trafalgar Square while you were there?
No, I actually didn't go anywhere near the centre of town.
If you had been to Trafalgar Square, you would have seen the spectacle that adorns this very famous public plaza in central London around this time of year, which is a very large Christmas tree. And did you know that this tree gets sent from Norway every year?
I did actually know that because when I was at school, we would sing Christmas carols around that very Norwegian Christmas tree every year. So I know it well, but I can't actually remember why Norway give a tree to Trafalgar Square.
So it's actually a tradition that dates back to World War II. After Norway got occupied by Nazi Germany, the Norwegian king and the government fled to London. And it was from London, actually, that quite a lot of Norway's resistance movement was organised. And NRK, the Norwegian public broadcaster, they went on air from London during the war. And it was a really big morale booster and a really important source of information for people listening in secret back in occupied Norway. But after the war, the Norwegian authorities thought, well, you know, we have lots of big trees over here. Wouldn't it be nice if every year, to say thank you for the support during the war, we sent a Christmas tree to London? And so every year since 1947, Norway has sent a ginormous Christmas tree to London. They come from Oslomarka, which is the big forest on the outskirts of Oslo. And actually, London isn't the only city that gets a Norwegian tree. It seems actually that Norway derives quite a lot of its soft power from sending trees abroad, the kind of like China with its pandas. There's also a tradition of sending Christmas trees to Rotterdam in the Netherlands and to Reykjavik, although more on that later.
I think there was actually one that used to be sent to Amsterdam and then we rejected it because they started sending grappa trees every year. We were like, actually, enough now.
Thanks, but no thanks. But anyway, a lot of love and attention goes into choosing this tree. Obviously, it has to be very tall, generally about 30 meters tall, and it has to be super pretty and symmetrical. And the candidate trees for this job get picked out years in advance and kind of trained for the job. They're a bit like, you know, those children that get picked to go to gymnast school.
Mm-hmm.
And the Oslo Forest Rangers spend years clearing space around these special candidate Christmas trees to make sure that the light can hit them in a way that makes them grow in this nice symmetrical way.
That's really quite an impressive level of effort.
Yeah.
So why is this Christmas tree having a bad week?
Well, because this nearly 80-year-old tradition is under threat.
Oh no.
And that is because of everyone's favourite Christmas mood killer, climate change.
Oh, joy.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the Europeans without us finding some way to link Christmas to the misery and doom of climate change. You're welcome. Oslo has a new mayor, Anna Lindboe, and she has suggested that the time has come to think about the climate impact of this tradition. The trees that get sent from Oslo to London every year, they're massive. They weigh about 4 tons. And obviously, transporting something that big to London by road and then by cargo ship and then by road again, that has quite a sizable carbon footprint.
Yeah, I guess this tradition was born in a time when politicians didn't really have to think about the climate impact of chopping down the tree and transporting it across the North Sea.
Yeah.
Blissful times.
I mean, the optics were very different back then. I guess the new mayor, Anna Lindboe, she decided okay, it's 2023. Maybe we should think twice about cutting down a tree that is, about 100 years old every single year and then shipping it all the way to London just for it to get turned into wood chips after a month. It seems frivolous. It's not very zeitgeisty.
Sidebar, sorry, I have another Amsterdam tree-related anecdote, but
of course you do.
I read in my local Amsterdam newspaper a while back that they were giving the big non-Norwegian tree from our central square to the elephants at the local zoo to play with after it served its purpose.
Oh, that's so cute.
Maybe it's better than turning it into wood chips.
Maybe.
But sorry, I interrupted you. Let's go back to Oslo. Has the mayor actually suggested ending this tradition?
No, she hasn't. And actually, she was very clear that she thinks the tradition should continue in some form. But she also thinks that Oslo needs to get creative about it so that the tradition doesn't have quite such a high carbon footprint.
Couldn't they just grow a tree in the UK, like maybe a Norwegian spruce? So like the same kind of tree, but grown locally?
Yeah, that is one idea. That is, in fact, what they do in Reykjavik now. So the tree is gifted to the Icelandic capital by the city of Oslo still, but the tree is grown in Iceland. That has been the case since 2014. Actually, a similar kind of route to this one came to Iceland earlier, because in Iceland's case, obviously the tree had to be flown in, which was extra expensive and extra bad for the planet. And since we're lucky enough this evening to have a Reykjavik resident with us tonight, I'm just going to ask Hildur about that quickly. Hildur, this was quite controversial at the time, right? This decision by Oslo to stop sending a Christmas tree to Reykjavik every year.
Yeah, I was reading up on this. And so the first hiccup was actually in 2009 when the protests were here, like huge protests because of the financial collapse. And the tree is outside the parliament building. And the protesters, they burned the tree down.
Oh, wow.
And there was like a really big worry that Norway would take this as an insult. And there would be like a diplomatic conflict about this. But they were cool with it. And then in 2014, there was a big storm in December, and the tree broke in the storm. And they asked for another tree. And then Norway was like, we don't really have time to ship it. And we were kind of thinking about not doing it. Is this a good idea? So then the mayor, the mayor of Reykjavik, he went himself to a forest here. I think the Norwegians, they helped us start this forest 70 years ago. And he found a tree that was just as big. So since then, we still call it the Oslo tree. but it's Icelandic now. But I think the trees come originally from Norway.
So much tree drama.
So much tree drama. But I feel like that works in Iceland because maybe Iceland is also very good at growing tall trees. I'm not sure the UK is quite as good.
No, actually, we have a saying, what do you do if you get lost in a forest in Iceland? You stand up. Because it's like shrubbery mostly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's like the birch trees. They grow really tall in other countries, but here it's like shrubs mostly. And I think we still import a lot of Christmas trees.
Well, this gives me hope, the idea that something similar to this could work in the UK. Who knows? For now, apparently, people in the UK don't seem to be that wild about the idea of just growing a local tree and then calling it a gift from Oslo. It doesn't feel quite as symbolic.
Katie, I've just been Googling it, and this year's tree in London doesn't look very magical at all, even though it has come from the Norwegian forest. There's this article from Sky News, and it says that people are complaining that it looks half dead. And I'm looking at the picture now. I'm going to post it in the chat, actually, for our Patreon supporters. And I do think it looks a bit brown and scraggly.
That's rude. Don't listen to these haters, everyone. Look, maybe this tree isn't the prettiest that there's ever been, but I've seen the videos with the light switched on. It still looks quite nice and festive.
Sure. But anyway, what are the plans then? How are they going to cut the carbon footprint if they're ruling out growing the tree closer to home?
Well, it sounds like the main thing the mayor wants to do for now is look at how the tree gets transported. As previously discussed on this podcast, the shipping industry is horribly polluting. Again, very festive topic. But if you're not going to ship the tree across the North Sea from Norway to the UK, it is quite difficult to work out how the tree would get there. You would have to drive it all the way across continental Europe and then I guess through the Eurotunnel, this huge 30-meter tree, which also seems not good for the climate. Mayor Limborg said that she wants to look at the road transport aspect specifically. So I guess maybe finding a giant electric truck that's big and strong enough to get it to the port. I don't know.
And why don't they ship it on a sailing cargo vessel?
A what now?
Like a cargo ship powered by sails, like they used to, because that is a thing you can do. I mean, I know usually you need to have a small engine on it for like emergencies and small maneuvers, but my husband made a theatre show in the Netherlands that they then did in the UK, and they took this really heavy set by boat, basically carbon neutral, using old school sails.
Wow. I did not know that that was a thing. There you go. Take that to the mayor of Oslo. See what she says about it.
Problem solved.
Back to my original framing of this as bad week. I should come clean. Are British-Norwegian relations really under threat? No, they really aren't. I just thought this was a nice excuse to revisit a charming, Christmassy post-war tradition, really, and learn lots about trees here and in Reykjavik. So yeah, there you go. Who are you giving Good Week to, Dominic?
I would like to give Good Week to Queen Nicola. Queen Nicola is the alter ego and brainchild of Laura Sengiumba, a Belgian artist and architect of Rwandan descent. And she created this character, Queen Nicola, as a reaction to some of the controversies around the tradition of Sinterklaas, who, if you haven't been acquainted, is the bishop character who arrives in the Netherlands and Belgium around the Saint Day of St. Nicholas at the beginning of December each year with his sidekick, Piet, or Black Piet, or Zwarte Piet, a character that is seen by many to be racist because for a long time he was portrayed by white people in blackface, sometimes with red lips and curly black hair. And actually that sentence shouldn't have been in the past tense because it still happens today in some parts of Belgium and the Netherlands, although it is luckily happening less and less, the blackface.
I mean, it's nice to have you back in the office, Dominic. Zwarte Piet correspondent, Dominic Kramer. I swear you talked about this last year as well, no?
Yes, I must apologise for talking about Zwarte Piet again. I realise we have talked about him quite a number of times on this podcast. But Queen Nicola is the perfect counterpoint to Sinterklaas and Zwarte Piet. So she was just too good to ignore. I'm sorry.
You're forgiven. Honestly, it wouldn't be December at the Europeans without some miserable chat about climate change and Black Pete. But I haven't heard of this Queen Nicola person before. Like, who is she and why has she had a good week?
So Queen Nicola is a character created by Laura with the goal of decolonizing the folklore in Belgium. She is a woman of color, she's a queen, and she gives presents to the children in December and hosts festive parties where everyone can feel good. And she does this in part because as a child, Laura hated Black Pete herself. She was regularly called Black Pete around this time of year at school. And she wants to do everything she can to avoid that happening to other children of colour in Belgium.
I mean, that is something that you hear about a lot from Black people, people of colour who've grown up in the Netherlands or in Belgium, right? That they've been bullied around this at school, that they get called Black Pete by other kids, which hardly seems festive. It's really horrible. But Queen Nicola, it seems more like she's replacing Sinterklaas, the kind of main Santa-esque guy, rather than being a replacement for Black Pete, right? Because she's intended as the kind of central character here, rather than the sidekick. Does she actually have a sidekick to replace the racially problematic friend that is Black Pete?
There are no Petes around, but she does bring a DJ sidekick with her to encourage people to dance and play.
Okay, I like that. It feels kind of wholesome and feel good. How are the people of Belgium embracing this tweaking of tradition?
Well, that's why I'm giving her Good Week, because her events are incredibly popular. She created this character 7 years ago, and now there are 5 other people traveling around the country also playing Queen Nicola, because there was just such a huge demand for her to be everywhere, and she couldn't be everywhere at the same time.
Great. I mean, I sense there is a however coming.
Yes, I was about to say but, because as you may guess, there has also been quite some negative reaction to Queen Nicola from far-right politicians and mainly white people who don't like their beloved tradition being accused of being racist.
Yeah, why am I not surprised?
And of course, I can understand that complicated feelings emerge as an adult around criticism of a tradition that you feel very nostalgic about and so loved as a child. But Laura stresses that she is not a threat to the tradition. She said to The Guardian, "If I don't like this tradition, I wouldn't have picked it up. It's also a desire to be part of it." But the controversy has affected her this year. She was invited to Ghent City Hall for an event on December the 6th, but the mayor backtracked at the last minute following quite some pressure in the press and from politicians, and her event in Ghent was moved to another less controversial location.
That is kind of depressing that an event involving this quite positive sounding character had to get moved because it was considered too controversial. I mean, what did Laura think of this decision from the mayor of Ghent?
She said she thought the decision to bar her from the town hall in Ghent was symbolic. She said, it's really telling us that you are not official, you are not part of this society. And the thing that I always find weird about adults who loudly oppose any change to the Pete and Sinterklaas tradition is that they always say things along the lines of, leave the tradition alone, it's for the children, and the tradition needs to stay the same for their sake. And honestly, I don't think any kids are going to get annoyed that it's Queen Nicola giving them presents instead of Sinterklaas. I don't think the attempts to conserve the tradition from these conservative adults is for the kids. I think it's for themselves. Because so long as kids get presents and there is some magic and theatricality around it, they're going to be happy.
And sweets. There needs to be sweets.
Sweets, of course.
But I mean, like, I can imagine this has been quite a stressful week for Laura rather than, a straightforwardly good week, finding herself in the middle of a culture war.
Yeah, I can also imagine it's really not fun to be the focal point of the far-right ire for a few weeks. But watching a video report from one of her events with excited children coming to meet her and receive presents, it looks like she's still able to enjoy the joy that her character is bringing to all these children. So I still think it's right to give her good week. She's a feminist icon who I'm sure will be getting even more requests for events next year after all this international publicity she's received.
Yeah, including being on this podcast. Should we try and make Queen Nicola go international? Maybe she'll get some European bookings after this goes out.
I think she's busy enough.
Before I went on maternity leave, we had a discussion here about what jobs everyone was going to do while I was away. And Wojciech, there was one job that you were weirdly keen on, and that is reading the names of all the amazing people who have recently signed up to support this podcast financially. And I realized that you haven't actually had the opportunity to do that job yet.
Yeah, I don't know where is this obsession coming from, but it's only intensifying as the years go by. So here I go. Thank you so much to Sitske, Annie, Beth, Alex, Katrina, Drew, Hendrik, Emma, Jaime, Sylvia, DR, Katharina, Darren, Willem, Olivia, Annie, Francis, Anne, and also huge thanks for those who increased their pledges. And these are wonderful people: Marie, Dan, Kyle, Alexander, Chris, and Karen, Monica, Eric, and Ivan. Thank you so much.
Yay. Beautifully read.
Thank you all so much. I know some of you are here and I can see you in the face, and thank you looking at your eyes. That's a creepy way of saying it. Apologies.
So creepy.
But thank you all so much for supporting the podcast. We really wouldn't still be here if it wasn't for all of you lovely people supporting us. So what more can we say but thank you. And if you don't support us yet, then why don't you head to patreon.com/Europeans podcast.
Be a lovely Christmas present for someone.
It really would.
So it's time for our wonderful guest to join us after her little cameo earlier. Norwegian Christmas trees aside, one of my favourite European festive traditions that I've heard about ever comes from Iceland. And it is the tradition of Jólabókaflóð, which I'm almost definitely saying wrong, but Hilda can correct me in a second. But it means Christmas book flood. And it refers to the huge flood of books that are published in Iceland in the run-up to Christmas. And you then give these books to people as gifts, and then these books get read in a very cozy fashion on the night of December the 24th, ideally with a hot drink in your hand, which sounds delightful. But this tradition also has a very interesting history, and it also speaks to the fact that Iceland is a hugely bookish nation. The country is widely reported as having the world's highest rate of published authors per capita. It's really a nation of writers and readers. How did that come to be? Well, we thought we would reach out to an Icelandic writer to find out more. Hildur Knútsdóttir is an author of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, some of which is available in English, you'll be pleased to hear. And as you've already heard, she's on the line from Reykjavik. Hi, Hildur.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And your pronunciation was excellent, I have to say.
Yes.
Bravo, Katie.
Perfect Icelandic. I'm so pleased with myself.
This is one of those traditions that sounds so delightful. It's almost too delightful to be true. Do people really still sit and read books on Christmas Eve instead of scrolling Instagram?
I think they're probably scrolling Instagram more than they did. I mean, I certainly, growing up, so we have this Christmas book flood, but we also have like a special book that comes out, like the post office, they bring it to all the houses with all the books that are coming out. And I remember when I was a kid, I was sitting and I was like marking which books I wanted to read. I would put my initials and my sister would also put her initials on the books that she wanted to read. And then we would spend the night during Christmas reading. My kids don't do it. And there just came out like 2 days ago, like a new PISA where they're like checking like vocabulary and like how fast kids read. And it was like a total shock that we're going down, the kids in Iceland. But certainly a lot of people, they still read. A lot of people also read a lot. Just in November and December, everybody is talking about the books that are coming out, and that's like the water cooler chat in offices is the Christmas books. We also have like nominations for the literary prizes. That's also in December, and people are like betting on like who do you think is going to be nominated. So everybody's talking about books.
So where does it come from, this tradition? What's the history of it?
So it stems from the Second World War. There was shortage of almost everything here in Iceland, except paper. So they just printed a lot of books, and everybody gave books for Christmas because there wasn't really anything else, like no chocolates and no apples. And so, yeah, everybody just gave people books for Christmas, and that started the tradition, and it's been going really strong. And I've heard so many stories about publishers in other countries. They're trying to do something similar as the Christmas book flood. Icelandic publishers are actually trying to like stretch it out, and they've been experimenting with like publishing books in May, and like how does that work? Because it's really stressful for publishers, because it's just like a make or break for them in a few weeks, and then they don't like get any money for the for the rest of the year. So they've been trying to like spread it out a bit.
Sounds terrible for cash flow.
Yeah.
But there are only about 300,000 adults living in Iceland, right?
Probably less. I think like the total population is 370,000 people.
It seems like a relatively small market for publishers publishing in the Icelandic language.
Yes.
But it sounds like you've got quite a big publishing market. How big is the market of books offered in the Icelandic language, and how healthy is the publishing industry?
So I don't know exactly how many books come out, but it must be a lot. But it's heavily subsidized.
Okay.
We have like an artist salary for writers. I've gotten a salary to write books for 8 years now.
Like a government salary?
Yeah, like a monthly government salary to write books.
Wow.
So most of the writers have salaries from the government. So the only writers that like actually make a living writing are crime authors. And they make their living selling in Germany and France. Because we have a few authors, Icelandic authors, that are really big in Germany and France. And that's where they make the money. Because here, obviously, the market is so small, so you really can't make a living just selling here. And then the government also subsidizes to the publishers, like they get some stipends.
What are you going to be reading this Christmas? Are there any specific books that you've bought for people as gifts? Or maybe any like great Icelandic authors that you want to recommend to people listening?
Yeah, so most of the authors that I read have not been translated yet. But there's a friend of mine, and it was kind of like a funny story. So he published first in English because his books are fantasy books. Iceland is like a really literary nation, which also means that we are quite snobbish about literature. And for example, the crime authors that started out, they had kind of a hard time getting published because people were like, no, like crimes in Iceland, that's just ridiculous. Nobody is going to think that's plausible and nobody's going to buy it. And so me and my friends who are writing sci-fi and fantasy, we kind of feel like we're coming up to the same problem because people are like, no, nobody's going to believe, aliens in Iceland. And also they think that the people who read fantasy, they only want to read it in English. So this friend of mine, he wrote a book in Icelandic and nobody wanted to publish it. And then he got like a big publishing deal in the UK and the US. And then, of course, the Icelandic publishers wanted to publish it. So I would recommend his books. The first one is called The Shadows of the Short Days. We have an Icelandic word that is just one word, and it means the shadows of the short days, because the shadows grow long when the days are really short and the sun is low in the sky. And the second is called The Storm Beneath the Midnight Sun, and they are really good. And the second one just came out in Icelandic, so poor thing, he had to write it in Icelandic, then he translated it to English, and then it got edited, and then he had to translate it again to Icelandic.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh man. Actually, it's funny you mentioned crime writers, because the reason that we came across your work in the first place, Hildur, is because you went viral a while back with a very funny tweet about Icelandic crime writers. For people who didn't see the tweet, can you tell us what it was about?
Yeah, so I always thought it was a really funny story. We have so many crime writers in Iceland, but we only have one forensic pathologist. And for a long time, we didn't have any. So he just moved back from Sweden, I think. And he was just so busy answering questions from the crime writers, because they always, all of them wanted to know like a bunch of things. So he was just like, I can't be spending my time on this. So he decided to have a seminar for crime writers. And it like completely sold out. So he had to have another one, and that sold out as well.
He must just leave his phone off the hook, because he's like, stop bothering me.
Yeah, and actually, so when I made this tweet, journalists, they were contacting me, asking me, like, can we, like, talk to him? Like, he's not on Facebook, and he's not in the phone book, probably because he's always so busy fielding questions.
Oh, poor guy, you made his problem even worse.
Yeah, and then I actually met him at a crime festival, and he was actually invited to come and speak here because of my tweet. And I met him there, and I could apologize for sending all the journalists his way.
That's very sweet of you. Before we let you go, Hildur, you also have a new book coming out in English next year. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, it's a horror novella, and it's coming out in September. And it's called The Night Guest. And it's about a woman. She always wakes up really, really tired. And she feels like she's just been like dancing all night or helping somebody move. And sometimes she has like these weird bruises also. And she is convinced that something terrible is wrong with her. So she goes to the doctors and they do all kinds of tests, but they can't find anything wrong with her. So she decides to try to take matters into her own hands. So she starts eating better and exercising, and she buys a watch with a pedometer to like monitor her steps. And then one night, before going to bed, she forgets to take it off. And when she wakes really tired, she sees that she walked 40,000 steps in the night, but she has no idea where she went or what she was doing. It's kind of like a detective story where she's trying to figure out what she's up to in the night, and it's nothing good, turns out.
Whoa.
You've told me about this before, but it just gave me goosebumps again hearing that. Hildur, thank you so much for joining us today. In the show notes, everyone, you will find a link to Hildur's social media as well as her website with details of that latest book, The Night Guest, that is coming out next year. In the meantime, I think maybe it's time for some recommendations for things to watch and listen to and generally consume in the more immediate future. Let us head to the isolation station.
We have lots of visitors at the isolation station today. Kat, you've been reading through the lovely suggestions from our Patreon supporters, and are you now going to call upon a few people?
Yes, please. I would like to first call on Leah Opitz.
Hi.
Hi, Leah.
Yes, I wanted to recommend Small Things Like These by Keegan. It's a very short story. It's also set in Ireland in the 1980s, and it's set during Christmas time. And it's like quite like melancholic story, but it's also very beautiful. So yeah, big recommendation.
Nice.
My family are all obsessed with that book.
Oh, yeah?
And actually, when I was in London this weekend, one of my goals was to borrow that book, but it turns out they'd already lent it to someone else. So I guess I'll have to buy it. Yet another reason to buy it because of this recommendation.
Proof of its popularity. Great. Thanks, Leah. Kat, who else are you calling on?
Yeah, I'd also like to call on Daniel Farrell.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
Hey, Daniel.
So I've read, it's actually a book by another Irish author, Joseph O'Connor. It's called My Father's House. And it's about basically a group of, it's diplomats and priests and just other kind of civilians living in Rome and in the Vatican during the Second World War. It's occupied by the Nazis, and they're helping Jews and Allied prisoners of war to hide and escape. So it takes place at Christmas as well. So it's a nice kind of pan-European story, even though it's during World War II.
Great. I'll check that one out as well. Lovely Christmas tree, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Irish writers are having a moment right now. I mean, it feels like every book everyone's reading around me is by a different Irish writer. In the Booker Prize, just had loads of Pauls, Irish men called Paul, nominated.
So diverse.
Yeah.
I do feel like we can always count on our Irish listeners at Christmas. Last tip is from Alex in Brussels. Can you tell us about this comic?
The comic I think I bought upon recommendation by a friend who was also very much into cycling. I'm not a huge fan of comics, I would say, but I really enjoyed this one because it describes a long bike ride, which is located in France. So I think one of the friends works in a very boring office job, I think in an advertising agency or something. And his friend sort of tries to rope him into this bike trip, and they end up going and have lots of adventures. And it's just a really nice story. It's about bikes. It's very beautifully drawn as well. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
So nice. What's it called? I missed the title.
It's called La Ride.
La Ride.
Yeah, the tour.
Lovely. I'm a big fan of comics, so I will be checking that one out.
It's time for a happy ending. And this week, I've given the cheery responsibility to our producer, Kat Laszlo. Thanks, Kat.
This week, our happy ending is coming from Basto Girardi, an Italian village that has been plagued by a mysterious tyre-slashing situation since July of this summer. It was an otherwise peaceful village with just 600 residents, and people kept on finding their tyres slashed for their cars all of a sudden. Some people even had their tyres slashed twice, and the replacements were so expensive that people couldn't afford to repair their cars, so they couldn't drive themselves to work.
No.
But the question was, who was it? There started to be all this tension building in the village, and the villagers began to suspect a vendetta between two neighbors. But no one could figure out what the conflict was. And so then a new theory came about that maybe it was some kind of organized mafia-style intimidation. And they were like, we've never had a problem with this before. What's happening? And so no one could figure out where this strife was coming from. And the detectives didn't think it would be anyone outside of the village because the community is so small that they said they would immediately notice if anyone from outside the village arrived in the village.
I love that.
I know. And it gets even better because a big wave of slashing in October led the police to send out some of its agents to patrol the area dressed as civilians, who I imagine everybody would have recognized.
Plainclothes officers.
But no luck. No mystery tyre slasher was found. And so eventually they installed cameras, the police installed cameras. And finally, last week, the culprit was found, and it was Billy the dog.
Oh.
It turns out Billy has a very serious case of gingivitis, very sore gums. Oh, very painful. And local vets suspected Billy the dog was chewing through these tires to ease the pain of his painful, painful gums. And so the reason it's happy ending is because there is no evil tire slashing neighbor, no tire slashing mafia. The peace has returned to Vasto Girardi, and people can sleep peacefully knowing that there is nothing going on.
Oh.
Slightly less happy ending for Billy's owner, who now has to pay everyone back for all of their slashed tires over the past 6 months.
Oh, no.
Happy ending.
Very happy ending.
That is it for the festive episode. We are delighted to tell you all that we will be back in 2024. We might not be able to make quite as many episodes as we would like because sadly some of the funding that we were banking on to keep our team funded has fallen through, which is why it is more important than ever that if you do have a bit of cash to spare All amounts, big and small, are a huge, huge help in making sure that we can make as many episodes for you as possible next year. You can sign up to support us at patreon.com/Europeans Podcast.
It's true. I rarely think that we could ask if there's anyone out there that has a spare like 10 grand. That would make a huge difference. I mean, you never know. There might be like a billionaire listener
Lying in a cupboard somewhere.
Send us an email. We have a lot of people to thank for getting us through 2023. Above all, the amazing people who chip in a few quid every month so that we can keep this podcast going. We are so glad that so many of you were able to join us this evening, and we hope that those of you who weren't free or for whom this is the middle of the night can catch the recording later on our Patreon page.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. We have also collaborated with some amazing people and organizations this year, so a big extra thank you to everyone that we've interviewed, the artists and musicians that we've worked with, and to the organizations that have helped to keep us afloat. The Allianz Foundation, Journalism Fund Europe, and the European Cultural Foundation. And a little extra thank you from me. It's been an interesting year personally. Baby Lee is on this recording, I think, somewhere, or at least he was at the beginning. So yeah, there's been a lot of change around here. And I want to say a massive thank you to my three amazing, amazing colleagues, Dominic, Katz and Wojciech, for keeping this show on the road while I've been away a little bit over the last couple of months. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo your thanks to Katz and Wojciech, but also to thank you, Katie, for putting up with us occasionally messaging you when we really shouldn't have in the early weeks of having a baby when we were having some crisis. I mean, I always knew you did loads of work for this podcast, but I didn't quite realize how much work you did for this podcast until you disappeared. And I hope we haven't completely ruined the first few months of motherhood. Thank you. And also thank you to your lovely husband for putting up with us as well.
And thank you, baby.
And thank you, baby. I was meant to say that this episode was produced by Katie Lee. Thank you, Katie Lee, for producing this episode.
Oh, yeah. You're welcome.
That is it for 2024. Hope everyone has a warm and fuzzy rest of the month. We'll be back in January. Until then, goodbye.
Buonasera.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Take care.